It's 9:32. I'd like to call the Audit Committee meeting to order. We'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call. Jim Steele is present. Ed Lombard is present. John Goggin is present. Brian Thomas is present. Nick Cody is missing. Approval of the minutes from November 2021. Any questions regarding the minutes?
Chairman, I make a motion the minutes be approved as presented.
Second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Minutes are approved. Public comment. I see no public present. We will dispense with that. And items for discussion this morning. Town financial reports, which were sent out. And these were for the month of November.
In December. Sherry just sent out November, December the other day. We have November, December.
From yesterday.
November and December, yep.
Through 12/31.
Yep, okay. Any questions on the financial reports?
I have a couple minor questions. I noticed that and these are really minor, but they interest me. And my mind works, I guess. For example, in the public service tax revenues, 160,000 is actually, for the 2 months, is less than, I think the November statement showed
171.
170,000, yeah, 171,000. But why is it less? Why is 2 months of revenue less than we had after the first month? My question.
Which tax were you looking at?
Public
Public
service
service,
tax.
31,410.
On what page, please?
Page
Page
one.
one.
I'm sorry, on page one?
Okay. 31410, object code.
Actually, that tax is gonna come in throughout the year and it's going to vary. So that is what we've received as of the first 2 months. Projected out, it's gonna be a little bit short, but we could get a bump in future, checks that are coming in. That's just where we're at right now. We have other taxes where if I average it out, putting a 50-cent sales tax, so communication tax and others, where we are gonna come in over budget, which is good. So it's gonna make up for any difference.
That's, here's the thing, I'm looking at both of the November statements and the December statements. I'm looking at the column.
Oh, I gotcha.
I'm looking at the columns that say current year actual, not projections or extensions or anything, but the actual. So November says 170,000, December says 160,000 for the first 2 months, and I'm wondering why it's less.
One of the checks, I'm sorry, one of the checks that we received for tax was coded wrong and needed to be reclassed to the correct tax category.
All right, so it was just a restatement. Okay, I got you. Next question I have, excuse me, page 4. Last 4 items: improvements to buildings, other machinery, communications, debt interest. None of these items have budgeted amounts. Why aren't they budgeted?
Can you hear me? I seem to have lost audio.
And now,
Can you please repeat the question?
Page 4. Last 4 items on page 4 are improvements to buildings, other machinery and equipment, communications, information technology, and debt interest. They all show 0 budgeted amounts. My question is, why aren't they budgeted?
Those are capital items. If I understand your question, it's the 6,000 and the debt interest. Those are capital items that we don't necessarily budget for in those particular categories. I would have to look into that and get back to you on those to see exactly what's included in those amounts.
I would just assume, maybe incorrectly, but that, for example, improvements to buildings ought to be budgeted somewhere. I mean, that makes sense to me anyhow.
In principle, hence an interest.
Yeah. Another question. I mean, since they asked, I gotta ask questions, right? On page 5, the road impact fund. Under expenses, you have infrastructure, 2 items, infrastructure and curbs and sidewalks. I'm just wondering why they're separate, since to me, curbs and sidewalks are part of infrastructure. Unless, well, that's my question.
infrastructure is sidewalks and curbs are part of infrastructure. For things we don't allow of infrastructure, things specific. More line out, if it's something else.
Okay, I got that. That makes sense to me. But then my question would be, if curbs and sidewalks are known, a known expenditure from road impact, why aren't they budgeted? This shows 0 budgeted.
Right, so for projects that they're looking for appropriate funding source depending upon funds available, the eligibility of the project. For example, sidewalk replacement would not be a road impact fee expense, wouldn't be eligible. Brand new sidewalk would be. So we have monies for road impact fee, and when the council awards the work, we'll see in that to appropriate money for that project out of road impact fee. So the short answer to you is that there's an appropriation that needs to be added to reflect that. It didn't happen as part of the budget process. It happened subsequent to the budget process.
Well, I can understand the appropriation coming later. That happens a lot.
Does.
But that doesn't, we understand why it's not budgeted.
So
Anticipated appropriations.
I don't disagree with you. One of the things that we're working to do is to budget all the capital funds we have. Let's just say, just for argument's sake, let's just say we have $500,000 for road impact fee. But in September, we don't have a project identified. We should still show the revenue carryover, any new revenue we anticipate, and for project expenses, we should show none or to be determined. I'm not disagreeing with you. It's something we can work on.
Always spent $55,000 on it, seems like it's a halfway major item anyhow.
Well, maybe a placeholder.
Bear with me, Jim.
Okay.
Oh, see, several places in this, in these statements, of revenues that we have transfers in from reserves. And these are substantial transfers. For example, in the capital fund, you were transferred over $2 million. Or I should say the budget amount is $2 million, a substantial item. Where would I find reserves? How much is in reserves? Is that in the town's balance sheet or something? I mean, is that what I need to have to know what's in reserves?
So the reserves are comprised of several items. We have quick reserves. We have a general reserve of, I believe it's 19%, going off the top of my head.
Say again, Roger?
19% general reserve. We have a supplemental reserve that we do because we're in a hurricane-prone area of another 6%. So we put those two numbers together, and it's generally a 25% of our operating expense of reserve. And we have reserves for legal issues, employee payouts, and a variety of other things. And those are all specific listed amounts. And every year, we discuss with council what those amounts are, why they are, and to the extent that some of them might have been used during the course of the prior year, whether they need to be replenished or not. So then we have, besides that, okay, we then have our just reserve, which is cash, which is not appropriated, so we have on hand. That's sort of the last bucket, if you will. You ever think of these things as cascading buckets? That's the last bucket.
Oh, well, I can't go to any place in the budget and find out how much is in reserves?
Yes, we
Can't.
have.
Where would I go? Where would I go in the budget and find out?
The answer is I can't tell you exactly what account number it is. I could tell you that in the town's cash, total cash, there have been carve-outs for specific reserves.
By whom?
By the finance department.
Is it budgeted?
This budget is part of the budget, it's part of the budget presentation.
In other words, if I looked at that budget, if I looked at the
Whether they have it in 7 line items.
if I looked at the 2022 budget, I'd see an amount for reserves.
I'll leave it to the finance staff to say how they treat it, but there is a specific amount of cash that's set aside for reserves. If you want to know the amounts, I'll go to my office and get you the amounts.
I guess I'd like to see something.
I'll send you out a list.
Maybe I just need to look at the 2022 budget again, find that, and maybe somebody could help me set the 2022 budget and tell me where to look for reserves. So I'd very much like to see that. Great.
I had one quick question.
Sure. Brian?
Again, back on page 1, on the October revenue, we have communication service tax of, it was account or ledger 31,500. Then when I look at the next month's, November's, we've added a state communications service tax. Then it's got a dollar amount. We don't have a budget, but we got a dollar amount of actual. But then did we reverse from October the communication service tax?
There's only one.
Okay.
So I don't know if there's just a cleanup of a line item or whatever, but there's
Got it. Okay.
Can I go back, Jim, can I go back to Ed's question?
Sure.
So then the other thing that happens is we're preparing the budget, but then after September 30th, the year closes. And after that, the auditors come in. and they will set what our unencumbered cash beyond our reserves is as well. And that's typically projects, money we're accumulating for projects that may not occur in one fiscal year. So we may be accumulating money over 10 or 15 years for a project like a roof repair or something like that.
Yeah, I know there has to be some flexibility, sure.
So what I'm saying is, it's, besides the specific reserves, we have a capital renewal and replacement reserve. And we just have unbudgeted cash that's left over. It's not set aside for anything in particular. It's typically carried in a contingency line item.
When you take the cash and shift it that way, it's not necessarily budgeted. Is there some, what is the,
Pooled cash is just carried as pooled cash. Sometimes not even budgeted.
it's what, Roger?
Sometimes it's carried as pooled cash. It's not even budgeted sometimes.
Okay, okay.
We could have more cash than we have budget, I guess is what I'm saying. We could have more carryover money, incoming money. That total amount could be larger than our actual budget. And as a general matter of town's business, it is.
Town generally does not spend 100% of the budget. There's extra.
100% of available funds.
Sometimes they spend 110%.
They have to amend the budget.
Well, at least in the time that I've been here, generally speaking, we've underspent budget on the expenditure side, and we've had more revenues on the revenue side. The optimum way to operate.
I just, for one last time, and I know I've asked this a million times, and every month I told we're going to do it, the comparable period prior year for trending, again, it's not here. So, you know, when it shows the third one down, you know, how's that? 595,000, zero revenue so far. Is that a good thing, a bad thing? Same thing with like parking revenues coming in. There is nothing in here. If I was a councilman sitting here, nothing in here tells me whether the budget's on time. I mean, whether it's in line, we're doing well, we're not doing well. And, you know, the economy on the island has been booming with tourism, and we've had great crowds coming down from the north. Is that trending that we're going to have a nice excess at the end of the year in cash, or is there something going on at the state or federal level that's reducing some of those funds? You know, I don't know, used to be gas tax, stuff like that. I still think that that's appropriate that we put the comparable quarter prior year so we can look at trending. And I was going to bring it up under the member items a little broader. I watched the budget process again, and if you want me to hold on this, I will, Jim, but you know, I spent, like most people here, you know, we spent decades in government working with budgets, or in the private sector building your own budgets. And I look back, and I was from New York, and it's an unusual process in New York, I'll grant you that, but as an agency head, I had to develop a budget in August. We had a July calendar year, or fiscal year. And then it would go to a budget review group, you know, a whole budget division that would look at that and make comments. They didn't change the budget per se. They made comments for the legislature, the executives, the department heads. So that by the time it got to that final vote by the council, your two meetings there, they had been through an extensive review. That, you know, this last one, I don't have any objection to raising the fees. It's perfectly right to do, and some of that comes up at the end. But there was confusion, and you spent hours at the meeting the other day talking about the confusion where one council member forgot that you were going to use the money for workforce development. But you're putting money into work. Let's just use that as an example. There is an increase, and the plan was you're going to have a consultant look at that to come up, start to develop a plan, put some money in there. If you had a budget review, first off, you would have gone through that. That would have come up earlier and it would have been discussed. But you would have also, you know, had something more defined about, we're going to pay a consultant $30,000 or whatever it is for this particular outcome that we want to see for, you know, plan for workforce development. Or let's take, you know, I worked in tax for years, and we would, if we were going to raise the gas tax by 3 cents or the cigarette tax, you raise it by a dime, what's the revenue go down on the sales of the cigarettes, and how does that change the overall tax revenue? There's a balancing structure that goes in there, and that doesn't take place in the town. And I know it's a much smaller budget. I mean, this was a rounding error for New York's budget, but the principle's the same. And you've got a group of people here, that both the town manager and the mayor, I mean, you got some people here that really have a good idea on how to look at, analyze a budget, make those kind of comments. I looked at the road impact fees. My guess is we're going to get a chunk of change as Margaritaville goes in, and that starts to build out. And it's looking at those trends, what's going to be coming in, and where to do that. And I'm not talking about building the budget, Ed. I understand you're concerned about the conflict between auditing and the other, but just doing a review of it, like we're doing now, asking these questions and posing these questions for first the staff, and then for the council to have. You know, it's bothered me for the years I've been on this, and this year just kind of, I watched the budget process this year, and two big fee changes coming up at the last minute, and I didn't see a concrete, I saw the general plan, but I didn't see a real concrete plan coming out of the council member other than, let's build a parking app. And Roger, you said that's not gonna be cheap. And so, what's that really going to mean if we build a parking app?
All right, well, let's talk about that for a second, because in concept, I think we do have a good budget process. We have at least one, if not two, management and planning sessions where I tell the council, if you have any initiatives, please bring them to our attention so we could budget for them and cost them out and an understanding of them before we get to September. This year, we had a councilor initiative, actually two of them, just fees, which was not staff initiated, had nothing to do with staff. And he posed those rather than at the earlier M&P sessions in May and June. He brought them up in August or September, I can't remember which, sort of the tail end of the budget process. He came up with an idea, and he came up with a funding source, and he came up with a use. That was discussed by the council and subsequently approved.
The catch, if I may I, Mr. Chairman? The catch, John, is, I don't know how it works in New York State, but down here, as you well know, we have the sunshine law. So we can't discuss this ahead of time with the other members. If Bill Veach wants to come forward and say he's got this plan, he puts it forward, and he gets two other guys to agree to it, or women, whoever it is, to agree to it, that's what's going to happen.
And so don't.
Can I just finish, and then, John, so.
And I'm not being defensive. I'm just explaining how the process works.
The point is that, from a staff perspective, we just caution staff, we caution the council with regard to that we have a structurally balanced budget. Mm-hmm. But when they come with an initiative, if it's recurring, we have to make sure that their idea for revenue to support that initiative is recurring. If it's not recurring, we need to call that to their attention. And the example of that was a conversation about the community policing. We said that, look, probably figure out a way to cover year one, but it's not recurring. Those revenues are not recurring, and you would have to figure out a way to cover those on a recurring basis. So we have a minimum of 2 management and planning meetings. We have a minimum of 3 public hearings on the budget per year. So there's plenty of opportunity for input. Now, when someone has a brilliant idea on council, I can't control that. Okay, whether they have it early in the process or late in the process or in the middle of the process. The other thing is the business environment here, whether there's a 40-minute wait to get into a restaurant or it is 40 empty tables in a restaurant, does not affect our budget per se. only impact of how busy the town is with respect to parking revenues. Because most of the money that is generated by tourism is going to the state, and we're not really seeing much of that come back to the town. So while I hope everyone is doing well, and apparently they have been doing very well the last several years, I guess there's a lot of stay-home type vacations where people are traveling locally due to the virus and other considerations. Doesn't necessarily create a situation where we budgeted in this year X dollars and we have a windfall. Or a major deficit for that. We budget very conservatively, particularly on items that we don't control the outcome directly. So, which is why, as I said earlier, we tend to have more revenue than we budgeted for. Plus, we are conservative with regard to that.
Can I just add one thing, John, before, I want to give you a little background as far as what I know about this. Let's just use the short-term rental fee as an example here. Veach came up with the idea that we need more affordable housing for employees and other people on the island, which is not a new idea, by the way. That's been around for a long time. We all know that. But he brought it forward, okay? He got two other guys to agree with him. And that sets the ball in motion. So what we've got now is a somewhat of a funding source to get the project going. Since that has happened, every council member has been contacted by our internal consultants who are actually contract employees, but Sarah, you've seen Sarah at the meetings and so forth. Sarah's the consultant, and the other consultant that we have working on updating the comprehensive plan and the land development codes. They've interacted with each of us via Zoom. I was on with them for like 2 hours, and they were explaining this whole, so what they're doing is, the way they scheme out things is they're looking for places on the island that it can happen, how it can happen, how you can incentivize developers and owners and everything to make it happen, and so forth and so on. And that's the big picture. Then it comes down to funding sources, possible funding sources for this to happen, for the town. Different ways that this can happen, different federal monies, different, all the way down to people bequeathing in their wills to the town because they had a favorite waiter or bartender on the island. Things like that, just all kinds of different subjects. So that's the way I envision it. He starts it out here on the council level. It goes down to these consultants. You may think it should happen the other way around, but this is the way it happened. So now it goes down to our consultants, and then at some point there'll be more financing and implementation. It's not going to happen tomorrow. That's going to happen over 30, 40 years. Who knows how long it's going to take? But hopefully we can get the thing started, and at least it's in the works whereby it's not just a goal anymore. It's an absolute vision that we want to happen, and you have to start somewhere, and that's the way it came about. So, I mean, that's my experience with it. That's why, and I happen to agree with the principle of the affordable housing for our people here on the beach. I happen to agree with that. So that's the way I envision it happening, and whatever you guys want to add to that, that's fine.
Yeah, I just want to add one more thing before I relinquish on, and that is, so we have a new revenue source that got ratified the other day. Well, I guess today or yesterday was the first day we were collecting that increase. So take time for that increase to accumulate money to be able to advance those purposes.
So what I'm talking about, and I shouldn't have used those as an example, but what I'm talking about is you have a group of individuals that understand budget. They understand the relationship. You've heard Ed go through this, and Tim knows this budget better than anybody, as well as anyone. And what I'm talking about is in the budget process, as the department heads put them together, and they start to come together, using expertise here to go in and look at that. Remember, it's like the staff does, but it's the independent look at that, look at the relationships, look at the forecasting on that, to be able to provide that guidance to you when you go into your budget hearings with the staff in those 3 sessions that come up. It just,
Feel free, anytime you want.
well, it's not just feel free. I mean, it's something that the group has to agree is an appropriate role, but it just,
Well,
it's
I'm
something
going to
that.
stop you, John, because I don't think it's an appropriate role. I think the council sets the budget, okay? They set the millage, and we provide a package of services to operate within that millage. Now, if we're talking about a millage increase recommended by staff, there's a question as to whether the need is really there. And they need the input of this committee or any of the other 7 committees that we have, they're welcome to ask that. We're basically operating at the same millage we've been operating at. Council sets that millage. We're just basically operating the way we've been asked to operate. All the financial decisions are made by the town council. And what I would say is if they have a specific question that they need vetted by this committee or any other committee, they have that prerogative. To insert this committee in the budget process, in my opinion, is the wrong way to go.
You're all individuals and members of the community. I mean, you're entitled to comment on the budget just like anybody else is during these hearings. You know that, Jim. Anybody can come to the budget hearings and talk. And now, whether that's the scope of this committee is to formalize budgets beforehand to present to the council, I don't know.
In my opinion, I don't think that's our job.
No, I don't either.
Well, if by the ordinance, it's probably not,
And if we personally have issues with the budget, then we ought to attend a council meeting and specify those.
Well, I mean, I don't want to choose sides here, because I think John's got a good point, but I agree. I remember I appeared on behalf of this committee before the council 3 months ago. I've forgotten what the exact subject was, but Dan asked me to do that, and I did. I remember at the conclusion of whatever I was saying, Jim Adderholt asked if the audit committee would be interested in helping with the budget process. I wasn't sure exactly what he was talking about, but it sounded like it was pretty much along the lines of providing input to the budget or helping evaluate the budget or something, either before council or before the staff. And my reaction to that was immediate. I didn't think it was appropriate because we're supposed to be an audit committee. Now, I know what audits mean. I worked with audits too. That's after the fact. If you jump in there before the fact and then you're expected to evaluate something after the fact, there's a problem. There's a conflict there, and there's a big conflict. And our statutory requirement is audit is after the fact, is looking into what's happened and questioning what's happened and getting some explanations for those sorts of things, as well as evaluating the budget, or the audit, and so forth. But on the other hand, see, if I were presented with the question, is the budget process an adequate process? Now, Roger believes it is. John obviously thinks there are some things that could be improved. If I were in that position in the federal government, I'd ask the General Accounting Office to go in there and look at how this budget process is proceeding and what the rules are and so forth, and see if they can make any suggestions or recommendations. We don't have a General Accounting Office at our disposal, but we do have some state agencies that I suppose that could do that. And I suppose along the line, if you ever felt like you needed some evaluation or some input or some suggestions for improvement, that the comparable unit of the state government would be helpful along those lines.
I don't know how excuse me, Ed, I don't know how helpful they'd be. Who advocates for us is the Florida League of Cities. They're our go-to people. Anytime we have a question about insurance, finance, you name it, they're the experts on everything because they've accumulated all this information in the state of Florida for I don't know, 150 years, I don't know how long they've been in existence. They're our go-to, they're our go-to.
Let me make it clear. I don't think there's an abuse of the budget. I think there's an opportunity to provide more expertise to the council in assessing the budget. That was my point.
And that's always
You know,
welcome.
The group, I get where the group is, so that's it. I'm done.
Well, I want to say one last thing, if I may, Jim. That is that point that John made about having prior month the report or other prior information, so it'll be easier to see a trend, is a good, valid suggestion. And we will work with the software company who we utilize to provide these reports and do our budgeting software to see if we can add that to the report, because that is a good, valid point. And those types of suggestions are welcomed.
Well, I recall when I was interim town manager, I would look at current year situation, and I'd look at last year's and the years before, to see, hey, how are we doing? And the trends. And I did that, but it didn't seem that anybody else was that interested in it, so I didn't report it to the council.
I would be interested in that. I would be interested. I agree with Roger. I think that's a great idea.
I do too. I do too.
To be able to.
You know, and John makes the point, it's just, let me say one more thing, John. John makes the point about the economy, the local economy is booming here, and I see a number of items in our revenue categories that would be affected by a booming economy. Ad valorem taxes, property values go up when the economy is booming. That's utility taxes, more travel, local business tax certainly would be affected, building permits. For all I know, the solid waste franchise revenues would be alcoholic beverage licenses, half-cent sales tax, parking facilities. Lots of items in our revenue stream are affected by.
Well, so ad valorem taxes, just so you understand, ad valorem taxes are set on whatever the property values were in December of 2020, or for 21 for this year. So it's you know, the state uses a very, very conservative approach to things. You know, when gas prices go up, yeah, so, you know, we'll get some more money on the half-cent gas, on the half-cent
When there's more traffic.
gas side, where people are using more gas, but it's not going to substantially change the budget. So it's not going to be that, you know, we can now do a $10 million project that we weren't able to do otherwise. That happened. So we're very careful not to get caught in the peak, the excitement over the peak, and some money that's coming in. We look at the long-term trends, as Bill was saying, or we commit ourselves financially to a concept.
It's a double-edged sword, though, this boom, Ed. You know, all this homesteaded property is going off the books, and non-homesteaded property is coming onto the books. So that theoretically should increase the revenue to the town. But on the other hand, it's also increasing all the strain on the town with all these short-term rentals. So it's a double-edged sword.
But that's the point, Ray, is that you take permit. Let's say permits go up by 20%, the permit fees. Looking at what's in those permits, are they new houses? Are they, you know, refurbishing rental, you know, short-term rentals? And it's being able to do that kind of analysis and trending to tell you that, look, like Bill pointed out, I think he said, what are we up to, 2,500 or 2,700 short-term rental registrations or something, up from 1,300. The number was dramatic in the increase. But seeing that trend by analyzing the budget will give, you know, indication of this is what's happening. Now, how do we now invest to handle the short-term rentals? You know, what's that going to change in the services the town has to provide? That's the type of analysis that I'm talking about in budget. Again, I don't think there's any abuse in the budget process, and I do agree that, you know, the councilmen are going to bring stuff up. That's their job. That's their role. But it's looking at that budget to look at these kind of trends. Some of it's comparable quarters, prior periods. Some of it is if you have a big increase in one area, what caused that increase? And what's the trend that means to the town? And then how do you invest your future to handle those trends? That's my point, and so
I think
I
that's-
belabored
I
it.
think
and
as a
so-
general statement, John, that's right, but, and I think, you know, I worked in an organization where, you know, the budget hearing started at 9 in the morning and went to 11 o'clock at night. And the change memo from the changes from the first budget hearing to the second budget hearing was 45 pages. Just changes in a matter of 2 weeks based on those public hearings. I get what you're saying, but I do think there's a couple, what happens is there's a lot of education that happens because people have ideas and they don't really understand our budget process and they start running down a path and we have to reel them back. So let me just give you a couple examples. We don't have a specific trust fund for our building services department, but we do not spend any excess building services revenues on anything other than things that are directly to building services. So if they had $1 million surplus, it wouldn't change a thing in our budget. The concept that what the fees are for a particular thing. We present to the council what the fees are every year and discuss whether there's a need for an increase or not. Again, generally the focus is when the staff says we need to increase for something. You know, we need more money for X, Y, or Z, and therefore we're proposing a fee increase, or if it's a general fund increase, we're proposing to increase property taxes for X. And those things deserve scrutiny, and whether that scrutiny should be extended to, as I said, the committees or this committee, depending on the circumstances, it may be warranted. And it said I wanted to double the taxes. I wouldn't expect the council to say, sure, the property tax, sure, no problem, go ahead and do it. I expect there would be a lot of view and scrutiny of that because of the impact. But we're operating at the same millage rate that we operated at when Bill was the interim manager, other than increases that the council made. We made staff that the council made. Yeah, we've gotten a bump of some increased property values, but we're still operating at the same millage rate. We discussed what that increase is in this town, even if it's at 3%, it's not really a significant number. But talk about that and talk about the things that we're trying to accomplish, and the council, you know, it's not like it's hidden. Summarize, we don't give them the 50-page budget report. We summarize the budget text on one, try to do it on 1 to 2 pieces of paper so they can analyze the impacts of the budget based on how staff interprets them. We feel that, you know, we're very transparent about what we, the staff, are doing. So all that being said, you know, we have, I mean, in all candor, a very small budget here. I had 12 divisions reporting to me, and I don't think I think the budget here is equal to our smallest division. So I get what you're saying. All I'm really saying is that we have a budget staff of 1. We have accounting staff of 2 and an accounts payable clerk. So we just have to be careful about that we don't build too much process in, and we, you know, unless there's a particular need.
And I'm going to drop it, but there's just 2 things. One, ad valorem is what, 1/3 of our budget? Roughly 1/3 of our overall budget is from property taxes?
Well, if you think about the utility as a separate enterprise, probably more than that, about closer to half.
I was thinking just straight ad valorem, because we've been talking about property values. It's about 1/3, I believe. And yeah, the budget office is one, and it's changed over quite a bit, and I was looking to supplement them with some expertise. And I'm done with this topic. I brought it up, and thanks for indulging me.
Any other questions on the financial reports? I just had one, and it's on page 14. Look at the water utility. Water sales, I was shocked. Water sales for December, because for November, water sales like 329,000. And for November and December, they're over $1 million. So it more than doubled. December's water sales were more than doubled those of November.
Was that December of this year or the prior year?
December 21.
Remember how many people were down here?
It was just surprising, and it more than
Yeah.
doubled
Oh, well,
our sales from December to
doesn't
versus
surprise
November.
me.
Any other questions? All right, that'll finalize our report on financial reports.
Jim? One last thing, as I said to you all a couple of meetings ago, and when you appropriately raised a question that you weren't getting the reports on a timely basis, I think you will acknowledge, at least in the last couple of months, that staff has gone above and beyond to get you the information. We have a chance to review it and take a look
Very
at it.
good, we
These are good
appreciate your
reports,
thoughts.
yeah.
Yep, very good. Audit engagement status. Questions from committee members on the audit? How it's going? I have one, and that is, it was last year when the financial reports were presented to the audit committee. There was no one from the auditors attended the meeting. I think a representative of the auditors should attend that audit committee meeting to answer any questions.
Well, I think when you raised that point, which is a really good point, that Roger said that he would make sure that was gonna be done this year. Didn't you, Roger?
I did, and we
Yeah.
talked to the auditor about it, and they've assured us that, subject to any pandemic limitations where they can't be here in person, they'll be here by Zoom, but they will attend.
Okay, that's my own comment. Any other comments?
Well, we had some, before the meeting convened, I had some discussions about this letter, this engagement letter with Sherry, I guess, off the record. And I was satisfied with her explanation of why water and stormwater weren't included in this engagement letter. They are included in this financial statement audit. It's just that they weren't mentioned in the budgetary comparison analysis that auditor is going to do. But somebody explained to me that wasn't the intent.
Well, I think a good subject perhaps for your next meeting, because we will be going out for new auditor solicitation for long. So to the extent you want to look at that and list or improve upon the scope of services that we request from the auditor, of course there'll be a commensurate change in the cost, but to the extent that you feel that there are additional services or enhancements that are needed in that engagement, we of course could then that in that RFP for.
And Maudlin and Jenkins' audit term expires this year. Providing this year's audit, but after that,
We'll do another solicitation. So to the extent that you would like additional information produced by the auditor or review by the auditor of other areas or more depth review in certain areas, this would be a good time for you to be thinking about that scope of services so that when we get to the point where we put out that request for proposals, we can incorporate any additional ideas or suggestions you may have.
Member items. Brian?
Yeah, I've got two. One, I thought about this as I was over the last couple of months. Roger, you and your staff done a phenomenal job at grants. I don't know how total you've actually brought in, but I was thinking that that's something the general public should. I know it talks about it at each council meeting, and they're individually there, and they'll talk about you got $1 million here, 500,000 here. I would think that, that would be a great thing for the PIO to kind of put together a little article about just how much the capability, the skills of grant writing, which is a very unique talent, has brought in over like the last 3 to 5 years. I just think that it's an accomplishment that your staff has done that's not getting the holistic view of what it's really meant to the town. So I just offer that out. Mark, throw it out as much to the mayor that you work with the PIO to kind of talk about just what you've done in the areas you've done it in. You just deserve kudos for it, and I think that putting it out there would be worthwhile.
We'll definitely put together a list of accomplishments and covering that and maybe some other things for general public and the council and all to help the community understand.
I just think that it's something that gets piecemealed out, and they don't really understand the impact that's meant to them financially and development that has been able to take place in the town. So,
I absolutely agree with that. I took a stab at that at the last meeting that was aborted because we didn't have a quorum. But I noted then that up until that point, I thought we had only gotten like 1.8 million, which is a lot, out of the infrastructure bill that was adopted by the Congress this past year. The so-called anyhow, the infrastructure bill was passed. And Roger pointed out it was more like 3 million or 3.5 million, I think, at that.
2 years.
And Ray was there too. And I had done a little back of the envelope comparison to that 3 point some million versus the population of as it is. We got 2 or 3 times the per capita bang from that infrastructure grant money or whatever it's called, as opposed to our population. So we're really doing really well. I don't know if that's going to be part of your analysis, but I suggest that you make it part of it. The amount of funds that we derive from that, because I know that you or Ray or somebody, probably several of you, had a lot to do with acquiring those monies, and it's not easy because it's not an unlimited amount. But we did really well.
I'd love to take credit for that, Ed, but I can't. Roger
Did you have
understands.
another point?
you're a politician, you'll figure it out. First I want to, I mentioned a couple people beforehand. As of yesterday, I no longer have a resident of Fort Myers Beach, so after next week's public safety meeting, when I thank them for letting me serve with them, I'm going to be submitting resignation because I'm no longer a resident to the town council and to the mayor. But it's been interesting working with you guys. I've learned a lot. You guys, this is a unique group here, so it's been a challenge, but it's also been a lot of fun working with you. I learned a whole lot, so thank you.
Yeah, we're gonna miss you.
We're gonna miss you, John.
Appreciate your input. It's been
Roger,
very
is
valuable.
residency a requirement in the ordinance for this committee?
Residency, as I recall, it can be waived by council. I don't know for all committees, but I know for some for sure.
Some don't even require residency.
Yeah, the enabling ordinance says that audit committee members must be residents of the town.
Okay, well, there it is.
And before this comes up with the next committee that I resign from, I'm a big believer that the people in the town should be the ones that make these decisions, certainly on the audit committee, so I appreciate the thought, but I encourage you strongly to go out and recruit, and when you recruit, it's more than just there's an opening. I'd actually like to see you put in there, this is what the committee does, this is their responsibility, and that they do have an impact on what's going on, more than just there's an opening. So maybe work a little with the PIO to any openings, that this is what the committee really is doing, and you can make an impact in the town by doing this. So,
Well, John,
thank you.
on behalf of the council, we want to thank you for your service. You've always been helpful, and wish you luck in your new venture. And
They try to learn to play golf again after.
well, you picked a bad course to do it on.
That's a tricked up golf course out
You know what? Any course for me is bad right now, so it's really going to make a whole lot of difference.
Well, good luck. Hit them straight.
Ed, have you got anything?
No, except to thank John for his survey. He really has provided a lot of really good input and topical, right on the money inputs. We're gonna miss you, John.
Yes, we are. I only have one. Status of a finance director. You still searching, or you feel like things are okay now, or?
Well, so right now, our situation is, we have Joan, as you know, and Sherry, and we have a, finance director, two CPAs. We're advising them on an as-needed basis. We're still recruiting. I will tell you that the urgency is diminished. Plus, the existing staff is doing a great job. So, we'll keep our ears to the ground and continue to look for somebody. Particularly, find someone who can fit in with our existing team, because now that's becoming an important criteria. We have a team that's working very well together. A little bit concerned about introducing sort of, a new offensive playbook at this particular point in time. We are continuing to look.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions?
Mr. Chairman, I think you have one more announcement, do you not?
Oh, I do, yes. Hughes Memorial Service. Be February 26th, 11 a.m. at St. Raphael's Church, is right over here.
No, down on Williams Drive.
Williams Drive, that's right, Williams Drive. February 26th, 11 a.m. Memorial service for Dan Hughes.
Saturday.
With that, we'll adjourn at 10:20.
A motion to adjourn, but that's okay.